So we actually start all of our meetings with the mission of the Children's Museum, which is the Children's Museum's mission is to provide innovative museum experiences which foster joy, creativity, and curiosity. And you notice that we don't actually mention who the audience is, and we also are pretty broad about that because we actually are not crazy about defining our audience as children, because 50% of our audience are adults. I mean, they come in and with their kids, and we think that they should have all of those joy, creativity, and curiosity things. This is one of my favorite quotes: learning is experience, everything else is just information. And we kind of follow that at the museum, along with a design philosophy of play with real stuff. So we're really trying to get at this authentic learning. This is a museum as it exists. Well, this was taken in 2004. We've actually expanded into a public park in front of the museum, and now we're in the midst of taking, we have these 3 buildings, now we're in the midst of taking over that building. We're now seeing about 275,000 people a year, which is terrific. And this is kind of what we do. It's unusual for a children's museum, but it's kind of standard stuff in a lot of ways. Open access to art materials in the studio. This is our water play exhibit where you will get wet. We have a nursery area for our very youngest visitors. And then, we started we've always been really committed to artists. And one of the things that we decided early on in 2004, we weren't going to do screens. We were going to try to do a no-screen museum. But then we realized that there was such interesting work out there that artists were doing. And this is by Camille Utterbach, who you may know. She was a visiting professor here a couple of years ago. We actually commissioned her to do this piece. It's called Text Rain. And you hold your arms out like this, and you'll catch the letters. And every time the letters change color, it's a new line of a poem. So it's this beautiful piece, very lyrical. But at the same time, if you're just learning your letters, you can just bounce through them. It's kind of like it's raining letters. And I've seen many kids bouncing their initial, it's C for Charlie. So it's a lot of fun. This is another piece, again, kind of combining using this technology and kind of the 3D world at the same time. We're really interested in that in the intersection. And this is called A Wooden Mirror. Have you all seen this? Okay. This is by Danny Rosen out of NYU. And we saw this in his studio at NYU, and I just immediately bought it. And we bought it, and it was a bad buy because the technology, when we first bought it, the servo motors all just burned out within, 6 months of us having this exhibit. We just reinstalled it. Danny came in. That's actually the reinstalled piece, and Danny taking a picture. It actually combines video, so it reads you as a black and white image, and when the pixels are facing up, the wooden pixels, that's white, and when they're facing down, it's black, and then kind of all variations. Very, very, I'm kind of nuts about this piece, especially now that it's working. We do a lot of work with ETC, and this is our latest with them using Kinect's technology. We have the 2nd largest puppet collection in the United States, which nobody knows about. And we have beautiful puppets on display, but we wanted to make them accessible to our audience. So we actually hired ETC students to work, and they actually become the puppets. So you can see here the kids are kind of being those puppets up there. It's a lot of fun. Just came on the floor not so long ago. About 5 years ago, we started a new program that actually came about because of Jesse Schell's idea that I completely stole from him. I'll just say that right now. We were all in a meeting together.
One last thing for me to do.
We were all in a meeting together talking about remaking learning, remaking learning kind of forum. And Drew Davidson, who I did not know, was sitting next to me. And Jesse got up, and we were all supposed to come up with big ideas to change education. And so, Drew and I came up with our big ideas, and no one liked them. No one liked any of our ideas. We were like, here we thought we were creative people, but no one liked them. And then Jesse gets up, and he tells this great story about this maker space. And Drew and I looked at each other and said, yeah, let's do that one. So we completely stole it from him, and I threw $5,000 at it. We carved out a little space, and Drew actually gave us 3 students for the summer to explore the notion of make shop, what has become to be known as make shop. It was a smashing success. We prototyped, all of our exhibits are done in-house. And we prototyped this exhibit, and we found that the parent-child engagement was off the charts. We also found that the learning, we have a research and learning department at the museum, was really quite amazing what was happening in this. And this is where we kind of developed this idea that we were a lab for learning, that you can't fail a museum. So why not use the museum to try out ideas and try things out and experiment and kind of find the edge of education. So it's become this huge hit at the museum. Our age range has gone up. 30% now of our kids are 8 and above. We have actually gotten to be recognized as kind of one of the foremost people around maker education. And it's all done in this space. The thing that we have actually realized over this kind of experimental time, it always comes down to the people interactions, which has made the administration, me, think differently about budgeting, because now we're investing in people. We're not investing in stuff. So, we've gone through this kind of metamorphosis, I'd say, from doing kind of standard exhibits to then doing things that are kind of, art technology based. Now we're actually into this maker space where we're really relying on people, and it kind of marries the technology and it marries the physical world. So not only do we have sewing machines and soldering irons, but we do have 3D printers, and we have animation stands, and this is makey on the one side. And everything is kind of raw. I mean, it's really raw, and kids feel like they can actually sit down and mess around, and that's the idea, and we provide a supportive environment to do that. So, again, we've kind of been experimenting with all of these different ways of thinking about what a museum experience is. But the project I really want to talk to you about is something that we did last year called XOXO, the Love and Forgiveness exhibit. And it's always been a dream of mine to do exhibits around the big issues of life. Could we actually give a space to people to have conversations about love, about death, about kindness, about sex, even with kids? I mean, kind of these issues that we all kind of struggle with, or that not struggle with, but always have questions about and want to have conversations about. The Fetzer Institute actually funded this exhibit. Big experiment. These are kind of the beauty shots of it. We did a couple of things. We had this wall where on this side it says, how has someone been kind to you? And you would write on the blue tags and you would hang them up. And what do you do with the mad that you feel? Which is actually a Mr. Rogers idea. So these really amazing things happen when you just ask people these questions and say, could you write it down? And when you ask a 5-year-old these questions, it can be really, really profound. The other thing that we did that I never ever thought would work, and I have to give all the credit to our designers, is that we did this piece over here where you would write down something that was really bugging you, or something that made you mad, or someone that made you mad. And you would take it over to this area, and you would put it in, and you'd shred it. It worked. I have no idea why, but you felt like, okay, I'm kind of over that. It gave you a way to kind of release this negative energy. I think everybody should have them. Here are some of the tags that we would get. My aunt makes me feel good about myself. Love you, Panny. Love Josie. Just these expressions that, it's kind of funny. We don't talk about love and forgiveness. And, I'm actually on this kick that if we started talking about love and forgiveness and kindness early on, maybe we wouldn't have to deal with bullying later on. So why aren't we talking about the big issues? This was one of my favorite things that the guys came up with. You actually would write a message of love to someone you love, and it was like this message, and you would actually crush it, and then you'd crush it again, and eventually it would make it into a little token with a heart on it. and you would give it to someone that you loved, and you would never know what it said. So my 21-year-old came to pick me up, and I was, of course, ready to go. And I said, just go out on the floor and, do whatever. And he came back, and he just pushed this little token across the desk to me. And it's kind of fun. And at the same time, when you're 21, you don't get those opportunities to tell your mom that you love them as much. So it's these little moments that, you kind of really love. I did have a father stop me in the hall and say, I must say to my kid 100 times a day that I love him, but this is the first time we ever talked about what that meant. And I felt like I could retire that day, actually. So, all sorts of things where you could take pictures with your phone and send them to people. And then we did this project. Where's my purse? We did this project with an artist called the Love Letter Project. And this is the thing that really kind of was very emotional for us and very kind of got it right at it. We asked kids to write love letters. And just to give you a kind of an example, this one I really love because I'm, Dear Dad, I went to Pittsburgh for a field trip. We went to a bunch of cool rooms. Someday I want to go to all of the rooms. I'm telling you, it was pretty cool. Dear Mommy, you're very sweet and kind. You always are there for me when I feel sad. You're the best mom I could ask for. The only thing I want for Christmas is you. Whoa. Dear sister, I wonder if you have blonde hair like me. I can't wait till you're born. Now this is, of course, before. I'm sure when the baby comes, it might be a different story. But and then this one always gets to us. Dear Mom, I know you miss Dad, and I do too. I hope you will still remember him, though he's dead. I hope we fill your heart, but we can't fill our dad's shoes. I love you very much. Love, Braden. Hope we make you happy. So, we're kind of like in awe of like the honesty and this kind of deep emotion that came from kids as well as adults with the project. We also did something called the lemonade stand, which was another experiment which we took on the road and still are doing it. If you fill out a yellow tag and promise to do a kind act, you get a cup of lemonade, which, again, we would get these amazing, just absolutely amazing acts of kindness that people would sign up for just for lemonade. Sometimes they didn't even take the lemonade. All of this kind of got us, I'll go back. All this kind of got us thinking. We put this on the road. It is now traveling the country to other children's museums, but it's also going to the Muhammad Ali Civil Rights Museum in not Nashville. Anybody know where it is? I can't remember. Anyway, it doesn't matter. Louisville. It's Louisville. Thank you. The Canadian Museum of Civilization. We've actually had a woman in Afghanistan working on getting a copy made for Afghanistan, and we just got word from the Johannesburg Children's Museum. They want to buy the plans because they think that love and forgiveness is something that that country really needs. But we started to really think, well, what role could, if we really wanted to do something big, and here was the question that we asked, how would you take the XO love and forgiveness message and scale it to impact 50 million people? Like, what would that mean? And what would that look like? And how could you use like kind of the soul of the museum as we kind of, just talked about it, like these really interesting interactions and the big message. I mean, could you actually create some kind of movement? Not only could we do it with exhibits, but maybe using technology. Now, we don't know what that means. And frankly, I always rely on my friends like Jesse Schell to actually figure out how to do it. But it's something that we've just started to kind of explore. And when I knew I was going to be speaking at this conference, frankly, I was going to do a whole thing about Make Shop. But I decided that actually, no, the brain power here is pretty interesting. And that if we actually all kind of started to think about how could you bring a message of love and forgiveness to 50 million people, how would you do it? And so yesterday I just kind of wrote down 4 questions, kind of being more direct. How do we use social media to further the message of XOXO, could we use technology to share real-time experiences across countries? How do we overcome the differences in technology capabilities and access in the world, and who are the unlikely partners to spread this message? Are there people that we should be looking at or working with? So I had this notion that we could all kind of like get into little groups and maybe just kind of bat around ideas, but we are kind of a small place, and I was just, is it something worthwhile to do? I mean, are we crazy to think that we should think big about bringing the message of love and forgiveness to kids?
I was going to say, there's a TED talk on a lady that there was an abandoned house in her neighborhood, and so she just wrote, what would you do if today was the last day you were going to live? And like the whole place was, people just came and painted all kinds of things, and now there's like several hundred or 1,000 of them around the world. So people do want to have these conversations. It's kind of the way to have them.
Yeah. And is technology the right way to do it?
It seems like when you're writing things out on paper and like grinding up the, things that you're going to forget, there's like some kind of like impact and like a transfer of, not that I believe in this, but like transfer of energy is how a new agey way to put it, I guess. And it seems like on social media, you just scroll through everything. It's like the opposite. There's no impact. There's no presence in your hand. There's no, not that it has no meaning, but it's just scroll wheel.
What about like the ALS Ice Bucket Challenge? That was a way where you got a little bit of a mix of both, where you had people on social media doing something in the physical world, and then imploring 3 other people to continue down that path.
It was shocking how that kind of took off, isn't it?
Yeah.
With the Lemonade Project, what we asked people to do is to write down their acts of kindness, but then we asked them to actually post them actually doing the kindness. And we got like 5 people who would actually, take pictures of what they were doing. Because we thought, well, maybe we can actually get some momentum that way. But
I love to hear kids talk about it. Like, I think there's something very magical when kids talk about love and forgiveness. So, I mean, as much as you want to engage adults in the conversation, I think maybe finding a way for adults to step back and just listen to kids talk.
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, when we got that, all the words are spelled wrong.
Right.
And, you're just like, the honesty and just like all the filters are gone.
Yep.
It's just so direct. So it kind of reminds you what you like working with kids.
Right, exactly. And it reminds you of what love and forgiveness are.
That's right. That's right. Because
I saw a really interesting thing down in Georgia at a school that I was visiting. They had in their cafeteria a scrolling marquee with a sort of, I don't say it's a real-time feed, but I know they came to a bit of issues, but kids would be able to write messages to other kids, and that during lunch period, they'd scroll through the messages. And at one point they did parents, but then they had issues with certain parents doing too much of what they should be doing. But it was really neat for them to put up messages to other kids saying, someone was like, hey, thank you for letting me at recess yesterday, or, I love having you as my friend. They also had the person who was there to read through that and approve everything, which this day and age is not always the easiest thing to do, but something like that is just such a powerful way for kids to express ways in different ways, and to have it out there for everybody to see. I think would really help with messages like that.
Yeah, that's kind of nice. It's simple technology too.
Well, and similar to that, the Hear Me project from Create Lab, and looking at locations where that would be tailored for younger children, and I guess that would be the issue.
Yeah, we've been doing some work with Saturday Light Brigade because they're located in the museum with us, and they've been doing some really interesting work. But it's really hard to get to this, and I think kids interviewing kids actually is where, maybe going to something like that.
What if you made a kid-friendly social game, but instead of microtransactions, it was messages of love? So they would pay to get in-game currency by sending messages of love or posting messages of love.
Wow, that's kind of interesting. Then you sort of wonder, though, is it like, are they just doing that?
It's an excellent
They game in the system there.
You're my friend or whatever. I got a skin now. Okay.
That's right. Has any, go ahead.
Yeah, I would definitely put out there that anything like this that was really going to work is got to be a mix of some kind of powerful face-to-face, some really genuine, authentic human connection combined with the technology. Because if you just do the sort of raw technology alone,
It doesn't work.
It seems unlikely.
Well, it's not very authentic either, right? I mean, I don't think, but we're trying to think about like, well, so we have this physical exhibit, right? So then what happens next? Like, how do you take that? I don't know. It's just sort of a curious question. And then we had this, actually, to be perfectly honest, we had this business development guy come in, and he's the one who put this 50 million in our mind. Because at first we were like, yeah, right. And then suddenly it started to like not get so impossible. You start thinking about it, and you're like, well, let's think. You know, if you did a movie, right, even a really bad movie, 50 million people see it in, 2 weekends. I mean, or if you're, I don't know. So suddenly you start thinking, well, it doesn't matter how long it takes. And then you start also thinking about things like, I started to think about movements like the Girl Scouts or the Boy Scouts, like somewhere they needed to get started and they have this other message. So what happens if it's this more of like a movement and we...
Yeah, I think I go to the Children's Museum all the time with my son, who's almost 3, and I constantly think about ideas I could steal for our school. And so the ideas that were in this XOXO exhibit are things that could easily be transferred even into not necessarily little kids, but middle school kids, where you're trying to think about sort of creative ways of classroom management. And I think this exhibit could be something that's then embedded into schools all over. And then examples of how it's used could be shared out, which sort of bridges the gap between the physical and the digital, so that people are sort of living it and showing how and then it's an instructional tool also.
Well, that's, we hadn't really thought about that, but can you imagine these big walls where, maybe even in subways where you tie your act of kindness or how someone has been kind to you.
Making it more public.
Make it a real public kind of, but it'd be great for schools too, right?
And also just having empathy, learning to have empathy, so showing scenes of man's inhumanity to man, and then how that could be changed.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was just curious, do you have any insight into what draws the kids to participate in things as an exhibit? Like from looking at the outside, right, it's like eliminate is the lure. Like, but in the other version, it's just up there like it is. Like, Is there any particular, do you have any insight into why kids are engaging with that? It's just the opportunity to talk about their feelings? Or?
Yeah, I think so. We actually have a Department of Research and Learning right in the museum, and so we have like 2 postdocs who actually study all the things that happen in the museum, because that's the only way we realize that we can actually integrate it into schools is by saying, hey, here's the learning that happens. Take it or leave it, but this is what we're finding. And the interesting thing, they studied this exhibit and they tried different messages. We had different tags doing different things. And these were the 2 that resonated the most. How has someone been kind to you? And what do you do with the mad that you feel? I mean, we tried, I forget what the one was. I was like, really? This is like such a dumb question, but they tried numerous questions to really figure out what would elicit it. And I think I don't know why, but those were the 2 questions. And it seemed like kids were just really drawn to it. And parents, it's this interaction between parents and children. This morning I was in a session where we talked about how do you get parent engagement. And I think it's by talking about issues that aren't being talked about, but that are also easy, Talking about bullying is kind of tough. Talking about love, that's kind of nice, I don't know.
A teacher I know is getting some money from the PTO to create a bench and the students will build and decorate this bench. And this will be a bench where if a kid is feeling sad or left out, that person goes and sits on the bench, and it's really the responsibility of these are elementary school kids. The other kids in the area, in the space, to look at and see if someone's feeling sad or left out, and then see what you can do to help. So Maybe there's, yeah, exactly, maybe there's something like that where you're creating some physical thing that kids interact with, and you know that when they're interacting with this thing, they're feeling a particular way, and they can sort of begin to process that feeling with their classmates or friends, or in a park or in a classroom.
That's cool though.
I know, it is.
It's nice. It's really nice. Maybe you have like a hug bench or something.
That gets good.
I think with most schools having like anti-bullying campaigns and all acts of kindness, love, that sort of intermixes that. But speaking of the children's museum side of things, I know you talked about how it's traveling to certain other ones, but how do you think it would become a way to get more children's museums on board? Because like if you go to a children's museum anywhere in the country, you're probably going to see something about the human anatomy, like the human body, or you're going to see something about water or something like that. How do we get a message like this out so that not just schools, but like every children's museum tries to embrace that? Have you given any thought to getting other children's museums on board beyond?
Yeah. Sorry, I'm just coming off being the Association of Children's Museums president, and I can't wait until like I have my last meeting coming up, and I'm like, woohoo! Because we're a little bit different than most children's museums, and I think a lot of children's museums are not at the point where they can even think about this. They're really just struggling to keep their doors open. We luckily I've been financially pretty secure, and so we can experiment. Now, having said that, I really wish even the ones who are struggling would be more adventurous and try and figure out who they are and try things out. But we also made a commitment a long time ago that we were gonna be experimental. We were not gonna have a grocery store, and even our water play is different than most.
Because when you hit somebody's emotions, they're more likely to stay involved longer, and
right.
Love, emotions, empathy, that's pulling on those strings that you sort of get that buy-in and that connection with them.
Right.
That would help them even keep their doors open longer, you would think, but.
Yeah, it's hard to convince when it's, there's.
I hear
Wow.
It's very different, right? Because like anatomy, like a exhibit on anatomy, those are facts, right? And
right.
This is what anatomy is, and this is always what it's been, and here it is. And now I'm passing it on to you, right? But this stuff is like you're generating this works off of insight, right? You have to trigger some kind of deep lived experience. Then they have to relate their own experience to themselves and turn it into this abstract thing, which is a little note tag, and you put it on a whatever, and it has some kind of symbolic value.
But you also have to listen to your visitors, and that's a lot of museums don't have that capacity or capability, because doing facts is pretty easy, right? You put up an exhibit.
Yeah, we've done this before.
You're done, right?
Yeah.
And that's why we think that this is why we're struggling with it, and that's also why we're trying to really involve everybody, because we think it's a worthwhile thing to pursue. But we also want to make sure that I don't know. It's a big experiment. It's a really big experiment for a museum to do.
In our last session, we talked about, is there a transfer of learning from games, and the discussion about, well, how do you know there's a transfer of learning in other areas? And we don't really do a lot of reflection in that way. So I was curious about the people that you have on board at the museum. Do they look at transfer of learning from the museum, and how do they see that, and where's the research if you wanted to look at it?
So we do formative evaluation, and then we do summative evaluation. And so during our prototyping, we actually put things on the floor to see what happens and to see what the learning is, and to make sure that the experience is rich. So we're very fortunate in the fact that we really committed to having a whole exhibit department. And so, we actually have a technologist on board who does some of our technology-based exhibits. And then we prototype and prototype and prototype until we get it right. And they're from the University of Pittsburgh. All of them are from the University of Pittsburgh Center for Learning in Out-of-School Environments. And that's actually where you can see all the data. We've had this partnership with them for 10 years. And actually, Jesse's done some play testing at our place, and
Sure.
we've had a couple of other, media educational folks come in and test at our place. You can use our researchers. They can use our researchers if they have that need. We're trying to actually make that an income stream because it's expensive to run a museum. But that is another thing that we're really looking at is, all of these different things that we're putting out there in the education world. Do they really have an impact? And we're at a children's museum that actually you have access to kids and parents, and it's pretty remarkable that all that can happen there. So, yeah. So, and we do have 2 Head Start programs within the museum. So that's actually another thing. This is a little promo. If you're working on a game or anything that you really want to focus on Head Start, as I was mentioning in one of the sessions I was in, Head Start is woefully behind as far as technology is concerned. We just did a 2-year study on it. It's like teachers who don't know how to upload and have never used email. I mean, it's pretty remarkable. I mean, you guys, this is the area that you live. We all live like on our computers, typing messages. And then I get it. You see Head Start teachers, and they are amazing with their kids, right? I mean, that's where they spend all their time, and that's really where they should. But they should also have a little bit of technology literacy. So, well, does anyone else have anything else to say?
It just happens, I listen to NPR a lot, and they have the story about StoryCorps and how you can now probably have an app to record it.
Yeah.
I was wondering whether the kids could record their message.
That's a great
on
idea.
an iPad instead of on a card, and that way it could be shared more broadly.
That's a great idea. And we actually had StoryCorps come to the museum a couple of years ago. It was a profound experience. And that was actually talking to family members. But we could actually set that up where kids could be talking to kids using the StoryCorps. I hadn't really thought about that.
Yeah, I keep thinking 2 things, just thinking about your creative problem here. One of them is how events are really powerful at getting people to organize in a line and do something. Because when you talk about trying to create an ongoing trend that just sort of extends out to the indefinite future, that can be a lot harder.
Yeah.
So I wonder about an event, some sort of,
Like
Valentine's Day.
well, we thought about like look how maker fairs have gone.
Right,
Like
exactly.
could there be a
Right, and
Love it.
in games we have the game jam things, which are just an incredible thing. But like a forgiveness day, we don't have that. Maybe we could use that.
Forgiveness jam.
The other one I wondered about is using technology to track connections a little bit. If you could imagine, if you have some system of sending messages of love and you can track where it got sent, the notion of let's see if we can make a chain of love that goes across the country or around the world, and then how many times can it go around the world? I don't quite know how the logistics of that would work, but that would be. But I guess connected events are powerful, goals are powerful.
Yeah.
And if like the goal is we're gonna encircle the earth with love 1,000,000 times, I can imagine people maybe getting behind.
that's a really cool idea.
Would be connected by people, like if you send a message of love to somebody else, and then they send their message.
The other idea, so you're trying to create a community around this. So what if your messages are effectively growing something? So using a garden as an analogy, everybody shares to that garden, and then that garden, as more people share, slowly starts to bloom. And then you have this kind of tangible representation of all of this other kindness, and it's something like that.
That's a cool idea.
Then you can connect people too, which would be even cooler.
Yeah.
Just thinking about this question of unlikely partners and this desire for something physical and also connection. And I think sending letters feels like something that is more meaningful than sending email or sending a Facebook message. And so what about the post office, right? As things are in a post office.
That's a great idea of being one of the unlikely partners.
Yeah.
Boy,
I don't know what they would do.
those postal workers need some love too, and some forgiveness.
What would happen if we sent 50 million Valentines to ISIS?
Well, I am so glad you brought that up, because when we were talking about this, I'm like, look, if ISIS can have that much passion, then love and forgiveness should have that much passion. And what's the antithesis to ISIS? I mean, how do you actually think about that? How do you actually think about what is?
Making a message to angry young men that are using the tools of modernity again, that they're fighting against modernity.
Or do you send them letters of forgiveness? I don't know, but I just keep thinking, if there's that much power behind ISIS, there has to be that much power behind love and forgiveness, right?
I mean, I think that power in ISIS is motivated by this despair that is in the situation that, their political systems are complete disasters where they have no agency and no hope of anything ever. Yeah. So
you have
that
to
ISIS
change
looks
that.
like, it's so bad that ISIS looks like a good alternative.
Right.
So I don't know if forgiveness gets around that. I would like it too.
Yeah. I don't know. I just think it's interesting, to actually use that oddly as kind of a model. Maybe not, or maybe, I don't know. Every time I brought it up at the museum, people would go, what? So, Jesse, you and I, yet again, I'll steal that idea. Well, thanks, guys. We actually like to play with ideas at the Children's Museum. I hope you come and visit us. And, thanks for helping me kind of, it's just really fun to talk to people who are really smart. And I know you all are because you're here at ETC. And this is not a world that I know very well. And I always think that you get more creative when you talk to people outside of your field. And you always kind of get re-inspired. And if anybody wants to help us rethink this, or not rethink, but think about this, let me know. We always kind of gather a merry band of people together and draw you into all sorts of crazy things at the Children's Museum. But we always have a lot of fun doing it. Right, Jesse?
We do.
So, yeah, thanks so much. And you actually get some time back.